Welcome to the Antigen Security Podcast. I am Timothy D. Block, Director Advisor, uh, Services for Antigen. With me today is Stephen Legg, the CEO of Antigen Security, so the big dog. How are you, Stephen?
Doing well, Tim. How are you, man?
Good. So, first episode. Today we're talking about endpoint detection and response, otherwise known as EDR. So, Stephen, what is EDR?
So EDR at a high level is the software that is responsible for continuously monitoring endpoints for suspicious activities and behaviors that might indicate some kind of incident. The way that they work generally is by using analytics that is like log data or activity data from that machine, processing that through a combination of human and machine learning analysis mechanisms, and then using those analysis methods to detect known and unknown threats. So things that have been seen before, things that haven't been seen before that might look similar to something that has, and really focus on a more behavior based approach to detection and response as opposed to like a traditional antivirus or endpoint protection product, which is more focused on just specific signatures and strings of text, whether that's in software, in files that are downloaded, or to files that are executed.
So, why is that important? Why is it important to move from signature based to more behavioral based?
So the typical breakdown that occurs and that you can actually see happen with folks that have implemented only signature based or legacy detection mechanisms, is that signatures can be avoided by just changing the text. So this is a very easy and quick thing for a malicious actor to do. Obviously, they go in, they generate their malware payload, which is some kind of executable. They rename portions of it so that it doesn't match any of the known cyber threat intelligence details that are out there for their particular piece of malware or malicious software or code. And suddenly it's invisible to those signature based detections. Whereas a behavioral based detection product would look at it and say, okay, well, I see you changed the name of executable to these random characters, but what the executable is doing still lines up with stuff that looks suspicious. So we're going to trigger an alert anyway. Whereas a signature based detection would just say, okay, this is not my list. You can go ahead.
And so, I guess that's kind of what it is, but like, why is it actually why is that important?
The reason that's important is that without it, you really have no visibility or sense of what's happening on your endpoints from a cyber risk or security perspective. You just don't know if folks are taking those kind of malicious actions. And by not knowing, it could result in a compromise that you're not aware of playing out without any indication to you that anything has even happened.
Right. Yeah, I think that's some of the engagements I've been involved in. That's one of the questions we get a lot is well, I had this other AV in place. Why did that not catch it? And we have to go through the whole explanation of it's signature based, so signature, and you kind of have to break it down, right? It's looking for some sort of specific thing. Well, threat actors have gotten wise to that, and they're now having different techniques and tactics, and they're burying themselves within the system. And that's more behavioral based versus them actually triggering or sending a file to the machine. That still happens, but some of the newer stuff, right, is not going to get caught.
Correct. And especially things that are designed to evade traditional detection methods.
Yep, and then they are invading it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I guess what are the benefits of EDR over something like AV? We've kind of talked about the signatures, but what other benefits are there out there?
So, from a real-time monitoring perspective, EDR provides visibility into different threads or activities on the endpoints. You can dive deep. It makes it very extensible. Like if you have an internal security team or folks that are operating this for you that are trained on it, they're going to find with an EDR product their ability to gain everything from like a SOC analyst level breakdown of what happened on an endpoint or what happened relative to a specific process, all the way through potentially collecting incident response, forensic artifacts and performing other IR related activities such as isolating or killing processes, killing network connections, generally being able to lock down that endpoint. Those EDR products offer a lot more capability than a traditional AV product. Traditional AV products really just kind of function more in the world of, we already talked about signatures, but once a signature has been triggered, are we quarantining files, are we deleting files and removing them, or are we tolerating and accepting them? And for most traditional endpoint protection, AV or antivirus, those three outcomes are really all that they can do. Some of them might have some limited network capabilities, but again, the value of those things starts to degrade because the lens you're looking at it through is, because of the signature differences between EDR and traditional solutions, just much different and less effective.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've always liked calling them like mini socks because there's
Yeah.
a lot more. They're collecting a lot more information on those things, and I've even had other use cases outside of a threat actor getting into the environment. Troubleshooting some sort of application or software that's running weird, or issues within. We've helped out. I've helped out IT troubleshooting in the past to figure out what's going on within a system. So I think there's definitely benefits there. The other one too that I found a lot of use cases for was lost devices. Right?
Oh
Is
yeah.
leaves a laptop in there, and that
Yep.
goes back to your point about locking down the endpoint. Right? You can when there's and how it works is essentially it's still connected to the internet, but this EDR product is the only thing that can talk to it. Right? And that's huge when you're talking about some sort of assurance as far as like a lost laptop device, because if that comes online, then it's immediately locked down and it becomes essentially unusable to anyone that's taken it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and really what you're describing there, or that value that you're describing in that situation, is one that's very unique to EDR, and also very, very important in terms of business outcomes for customers, or not customers, for companies that implement these types of tools. So it's understood, but I think not talked about at any great length. If you can detect and contain something, even if you couldn't prevent it from occurring on the endpoint, like let's say you have a user click on a link, that for whatever reason, that link made it through your email protection, whatever cloud workload protection you might have, it didn't get sandboxed or otherwise deterred from executing. So you have malware on the endpoint. Well, now EDR is able to make the difference in containing that and preventing it from becoming a bigger incident.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So who should have an EDR?
Really, EDR is one of those controls that, like MFA, that we say every business should have. EDR is just kind of a foundational system protection and piece of defensive architecture that is absolutely critical for every business, no matter how small, no how big. If you're a two-person shop or a 200,000 person shop, it really doesn't matter. EDR is still critically important to making sure you can do what you need to do without being impeded by security issues on the endpoint.
So and are we saying like all organizations, even like smaller businesses? Because I
Mhm.
feel like how does the cost play into like who should actually get one? And sometimes there is a small business doesn't necessarily need like a mini sock. I mean, it'd be a nice to have, but
A lot of times those businesses in that market space are often working with IT managed service providers, which we highly recommend for companies that size, because they're not going to be significant enough to have any real bargaining power with any of those big SaaS vendors. However, many of those SaaS vendors intelligently understand that the way that they're best able to serve those markets and companies that are in that kind of, call it small to medium SMBs, um, are able to get enterprise tools that are oftentimes managed at a price point that's affordable to them. You're talking um, thousands of dollars a year, not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands.
okay. And then where is it deployed?
So it's deployed. EDR is deployed typically, depending on the EDR solution, is deployed on endpoints that have some sort of operating system. There are specialized EDRs for things like embedded operating systems in operational technology environments. Solutions like Dragos are great in that side of the house. But in traditional, like Windows, Linux, Apple computing environments, any of those systems running any of those three versions of those three operating systems are really the prime candidates and primary target for endpoint detection and response software.
So, would you say like is EDR on mobile devices yet? Do you think it goes that way?
There,
IoT things as well.
some MDMs have elements of EDR protection in them, but I wouldn't say that there is a consistent kind of central point in the market that I can point to and say, this mobile EDR is an example of what a mobile EDR should be. It's a pretty new part of the market. Cell phone security is in general, I would say.
It's already secure, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's nothing insecure about running effectively a computer in your pocket that has no protection or restrictions on it.
I
Nothing,
will
nothing bad can
say
happen.
I would say that as long as you don't like break it or jailbreak it or unlock it and start
Okay,
downloading
sure.
third party apps, like you're
Yeah.
fairly safe with a mobile device. But I mean, yes, to your point, stuff can still happen with it.
Yeah,
But
certainly.
I just feel like with the ADR, it's more servers, computers, workstations. You did bring up
Yeah,
a very good point in embedded devices, which is huge. And one of the things in my experience, I don't know if this has been your experience as well, is a lot of these EDRs have support for older operating systems. So you're
a lot
talking
of
about
them do.
there is still Windows XP out there. As much as people within the security community don't want that to be, we're talking hospitals, factories, like all the places where it's like you got this one machine doing this one thing,
Hmm.
and that vendor that created that machine is no longer around. Guess what? It's running on Windows XP because it
Yeah,
costs millions of dollars to replace it.
100%, because it has to be recertified and go through all the other compliance steps, and they just don't want to do that because it's expensive and time consuming. So yeah, a lot of times those types of companies, whether it's a manufacturer, energy company, whatever, they often go the route of securing everything that those systems touch and segmenting them, as opposed to running full suite security on all of them, because those machines just can't handle it. Like embedded systems, to your point, are very resource light and are easily tipped over. And when that's attached to, like a metal forge or water filtration, or something that has an impact on human lives, then that's a really dangerous prospect for many reasons, right? Cyber risk becomes a whole different conversation.
Absolutely. What's been your experience with the deployment of EDR?
EDR, it depends on the product, but EDR in general, for the most part, has lots of ways to get out to entire environments very rapidly. The options that exist in like traditional Windows domains, or using remote monitoring and management tools, or other tools for software distribution and configuration management on endpoints, make that relatively turnkey in most cases. Now, there's always an odd duck out there that doesn't have those things, or can't implement those things for whatever reason, or has an instance of an issue with one of those things. And in those cases, deployment is straightforward but can be time consuming. So it's not something that's EDR, I would say, just like any security software that you're considering purchasing, is something that you should take seriously. Understand that, like any software, there's going to be a maintenance life cycle. There are going to be things that you have to do to care and feed for it. And if you're not using like a managed service provider or somebody that can provide a managed experience around that, your teams need to be prepared to absorb that work effort and plan for it as a part of implementing it, or just caring for it once it's implemented.
Gotcha. Yeah. I remember when I first deployed EDR and we were replacing an antivirus solution, and replacing antivirus for anybody back in the day, any other gray beards out there. It is a nightmare just trying to go from one to the other. But I was really pleasantly surprised with how easy EDR solutions, to your point, get deployed. They're usually a pretty lightweight agent, and as you mentioned, there's a lot more, I think, also deployment tooling out there as far as RMMs and third-party software deployment solutions. But I had a great experience with it. So for people that might be hesitant just because of that, it's actually a pretty good experience.
100%, completely agree.
All right. So one of the things we're kind of getting to the end here, but I want to talk about some of the new stuff. So EDR is kind of to me an evolution of AV. What's the next evolution of EDR? And I feel like I've already seen like an XDR. Is that the same thing? Is that different? Like, where do you see this kind of space going?
Man, I love conversations about acronyms. Um,
I got them
oh,
all. I came
you,
out of the Navy. We had way more, so we
so
came in
much,
more.
so many acronyms. So XDR often mean so the way we classify EDR versus MDR versus XDR. XDR, from our perspective, is when you integrate a traditional, or what you would define as a traditional SIM into your managed detection and response ecosystem and lifecycle. And XDR systems are essentially extending what MDR does, which, for those that don't know, MDR is a layer kind of above that attaches into EDR, and that often represents, in the way we define it, as the detection engineering, applied threat intelligence, and continuous threat intelligence improvement and generation, and like security operations support, like coverage, so managing alerts, managing responses to alerts, making sure that responses are escalated to forensics teams and appropriate incident responders, and generally filling the glue. That's how we define kind of that MDR layer. So XDR is all of those things, plus you have a centralized resilient logging source, or repository, that is acting essentially as a data lake for enriching all of the detections that are closer to those technologies, kind of across the board. So, like, as an example, in an XDR solution, you might have EDR deployed as well as logging agents or log collection agents on multiple other types of non-Windows, Linux, or Apple endpoints within the environment, thus giving you visibility outside of simply the endpoints, or what that EDR can see, but rather integrating that across multiple data points. A good example would be the Microsoft Defender and Microsoft M365 Defender, and that whole kind of ecosystem of Defender products that wrap around and into Azure Sentinel. That is what kind of a true XDR looks like, when you have those MDR pieces doing the interpretation, logging, and analysis on top of each one of those pieces of telemetry, but then also having that SIM kind of as a central repository for all of it, in on the off chance that a threat actor performs anti-forensics, encrypts a machine so that forensic data or EDR data is no longer available or accessible, or does something else to disrupt the log data that would give defenders or investigators visibility into that. And that's broad strokes, like how we define EDR versus MDR versus XDR. Does that answer your question?
No, absolutely. So with that XDR solution, to me, I feel like if you have an EDR solution and you have a SIM, that should already be going into there. Would you define that as XDR then? Like,
I
or at least a concept of it?
I would say if you don't integrate it all and it's not all a part of one set of security operations life cycles, then it is not an XDR solution. What you have are multiple different security solutions and a SIM. You have EDR, maybe MDR, and a SIM. But XDR is when all of those things are working together and talking to each other.
Gotcha. Okay. So is it more of than like a concept or a theory versus like an actual product?
I think like anything related to acronyms and product, basically, if Gartner or Forrester or any of those guys are talking about it, um, it's very much is about defining how the go to market is different on each individual tool versus another. Where we, I think, diverge from that and the kind of the general dialogue around this is, we look at it from a practical perspective, and what we really ultimately are trying to understand with every security tool that's out there when we're evaluating them is, how practically is this going to impact cyber risk for the things that it touches? Is it evadable? Can it be disrupted? Can it be disabled? How is it actually showing up when you get down to the bottom line of preventing an incident from either progressing or happening in the first place?
Gotcha. So I guess where do you see this all going? Like, what's the next step, the next evolution of the EDR space?
My prediction is that the market is going to continue on the MDR side to try to get closer to the sources of that telemetry as possible. The reality that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years in the market is that SaaS vendors also recognize that it is more effective strategically to perform and analyze all of those detections closer to the source. I think that trend will continue, but I do think there will be more true XDR solutions cropping up that solve all of those pieces, because at the end of the day, customers still aren't going to be looking to build massive internal SOC teams or have all of these things in house. They want a limited number of people that can operate it and handle escalations, and a vast majority of them that aren't looking to make that significant investment and have all of it in house are going to be looking for products that do exactly what you're describing, Tim.
I applaud you for not using the phrase single pane of glass. Well done, sir.
Listen, some people sell in this industry with snake oil. We like to sell with just good advice and actionable perspectives, and
Right.
that is very much a part of that.
Yep. So how do people get an EDR?
So obviously you can go direct to vendors if there's a particular one that you're already familiar with and that you like. Um, you know, if you're interested in our perspective, you can get engaged with us, and we can share more with you about the products that we've seen that have been approved for like insurance carrier underwriting as an example. But beyond that, really, what I would say, a good EDR, like if you're trying to break this down into like buying criteria, a good EDR is providing EDR. You could say EDR and MDR, are providing whatever level of support that you need. If you just need a product and product support, that's great. If you have your own internal team, they also should give you coverage for monitoring those systems if you don't have that internally, because an alert that doesn't get responded to offers you no value, and actually is just frankly a complete waste of money. Um, and so, if you're looking at kind of criteria to purchase those things, really you want to look at things that, one, fit into your budget, that you can budget for. That's an obvious one. Um, the the specific outcomes of the product that you want to have are things like the ability to isolate and detect on activity that is both obvious and not obfuscated, and activity that is obfuscated. So you know um, encoded executables or executables that are using techniques to evade detection. You want an EDR that can detect both of those different use cases, right? Because threat actors can do one or the other depending on the nature of the compromise and what they're doing and what their playbook is and who they are. You want EDR products are better when you look for where the MDR is concerned or managed piece is concerned, good retention of that telemetry data and the ability to search, index, and utilize it after the fact as a way to enrich your detection capabilities, and ability to forensically investigate anything. That's another really big one. Um, and then of course there are other features that are more kind of business case specific. There are some EDRs that integrate with firewall, that integrate with various VPN technologies, with single sign-on for like risk-based authentication and things like that. Those other kind of criteria and circumstances are more specific to your use case, but I would say those first couple things are the items that every person or organization that's looking for EDR really should be considering.
So yeah, kind of set your requirements, what fits
Yep.
your specific use case. I would recommend trying out a few of them because while they're all kind of do the same, not everyone is the same, and there are certain things about each one that may or may not fit your requirements. So,
100%.
any last thoughts?
No, only last thought I'll leave everybody with is EDR is very important. If you don't have EDR in place, you absolutely need it, and you can't get insurance without it, basically. So that's the best example I can give of why it's so critical. Cyber insurance carriers have recognized It is a absolutely critical control that every business cannot be without. So this is just like putting locks on your doors. If you're a retail business, you just got to do it. Otherwise, you're not aware of, what's happening on your endpoints really to any degree.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah. This is when we come into an engagement after an incident, that's one of the first things we get in place. So it is definitely a key thing. And to your point, with cyber insurance much more prevalent nowadays, I think it's definitely one of their requirements. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Tim. Thank you for asking those questions.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining me to have a conversation on endpoint detection and response.